Focus on reading. So, going to focus on the general education environment. First off, in general, the instruction is just much faster paced in the gen ed environment, which is a given. Students are expected to understand the content at grade level, so therefore the instruction is going to be much faster. The reading material in general is at the Lexile range that's appropriate for that actual grade level. Typically, students are going to be within maybe 1, maybe 2 years above or below that given grade level, typically. Otherwise, the stories that are read are mostly at grade level. In general education classrooms, the instruction is created by the teacher themselves. It's not research-based. It's not a set curriculum that they have to follow day in and day out. They might use some research-based strategies, but that does not mean that the entire program itself is research-based. When incorporating informational text, the teachers shared that oftentimes they might use newspapers or programs such as newsela.com, in which students practice reading actual articles and trying to practice gathering textual evidence, highlighting, using strategies while reading. And the nice thing about newsela is that the teacher can still select articles at lower Lexile levels to help accommodate for special ed students who are in the gen ed environment, as well as ELL learners and just struggling readers. Skills that are practiced in the gen ed environment are things such as theme, textual evidence, character point of view, and story elements. So some of these are a little bit different compared to the skills that might be practiced in the special ed environment. And as mentioned earlier, the gen ed environment does a lot with practicing close reading strategies. So actually highlighting in stories or articles, when students have questions while they're reading, needing a clarification, making a prediction, whatever it might be, this is often practiced a lot more. I don't even know if it's practiced at all in the special ed environment. And then the way this is going to work is it's going to show what's in common next. I'm going to click through those, but I'm going to come back to them. I'm actually going to go over to special ed next. So in the special ed classroom, the instruction is much slower. It's straight up direct instruction. So therefore, the skills that are being taught need to be taught day in, day out, sometimes for weeks or months at a time in order for the kids to gain these skills. So therefore, the instruction has to be a lot slower. It needs to meet their needs. When it comes to informational text, the teacher shared that sometimes when they get to a certain point in the program that we have at our school called Fusion, they get opportunities to practice looking at science or social studies textbooks, which are examples of informational text, and trying to use the strategies they've learned within those textbooks. So maybe making predictions or summarizing, finding the main idea. Those are practiced within those textbooks. So that's something a little different from the gen ed environment. The instruction can be scripted or very, mapped out for the teacher. It does not necessarily mean the teacher has to use the scripted version, but that's something that makes it different because it's based on research. One teacher shared out how she teaches a class called System 44, which is new for our school. This class actually does require a laptop every day. It's very station-like within the program. There's headphones, there's a headset, which this is not common in the gen ed environment. There might be instruction at times that requires a laptop, but not reliant, such as this program. And then in general, the instruction that occurs in such classrooms is definitely 2 to 3 years below grade level, most likely 3 or more years below grade level. And there's different levels of special ed reading classrooms. There's Fusion Boost Blitz, that's really focusing on decoding. And then there's like Fusion Year 1, that's learning, predictions and main idea. And then there's Fusion Year 2 and Year 3, and that kind of moves on to more advanced reading skills such as summarizing. And then there's acronyms within that program that are taught to the students every day to help them gain these main skills. They're in the way they're spelled in like acronyms. So the word clue might be an acronym, and CLUE all stands for different steps to get a reading skill. And then in general, decoding and fluency, which in the fusion class is called the bridging strategy, that is something that's a huge focus in a special ed classroom. Decoding and fluency does not occur in the gen ed classroom. That's expected to be learned already. And then in general, comprehension is focused on, but the strategies might be a little bit different. So as to what they have in common, both classrooms are going to have formative data gathered. It's going to look a little different, but teachers are going to collect, that data to help determine their instruction. Small group instruction can definitely happen in both settings. It's more common in the special ed classroom because it's already a small group class, but the teacher can way more easily pull even smaller groups within that group. However, a gen ed classroom can very well do this as well, especially if it's a co-taught class where there's two teachers present. Silent reading is definitely important in either class. It does not matter what level they're at. It doesn't matter what kind of book they read. Both classes emphasize the importance of silent reading and students self-selecting their books. Something else that occurs in both is teachers often will model fluent reading. In a special ed classroom, it's probably a set part of the instruction. Might be called thinking reading, where the teacher actually models, how to think while reading, how to stop and, make predictions, clarifications, things like that. Whereas in a general ed environment, the teacher is not doing that as often. They're just reading aloud a story to kind of gain engagement from the kids, get them interested in reading, and to model the fluency. There usually is some kind of novel instruction from both. And a lot of times the teachers will select motivating books, things that will meet their readers' needs and gain their attention, and do some kind of set skills around that. And then again, vocabulary instruction is going to happen in both. Actually, both special ed fusion program anyway, and gen ed in an 8th grade classroom, they work on vocabulary of word parts, so prefixes, roots, and suffixes. That happens in both classrooms. Now moving on to writing and language. This is not going to be as much, but we'll kind of go through the gen ed environment first. What makes it different? So, um, the gen ed environment will oftentimes do journals, whether it's typed or written. And in a general ed classroom, the teacher shared that usually it's very free flowing. The choices are optional because students at this level can handle that. They can handle a random choice of topic typically. The instruction itself in the area of writing or language, it's not research-based instruction. It's not that scripted curriculum as mentioned earlier with reading. The teacher creates their own instruction based around the standards. Oftentimes the instruction is really focused around being able to write research papers, persuasive papers, argumentative essays, a narrative essay or a narrative piece, some kind of a story. So different types of writing pieces. There are a lot more opportunities for peer editing in a gen ed environment because the kids have higher skills. They are able to independently write their own pieces of or write their own pieces of writing, but also share it with somebody and be able to give feedback. And students are also expected in the gen ed classroom to give presentations from time to time, where they have to speak aloud and listen to their peers as well. This is not as common in a special ed classroom, or not as formally anyway. Again, it's going to go through the middle part next. I'm going to kind of hit the button, but I'm going to talk about special ed next, and we'll come back to these in just a sec. So, special education, again, if it's writing instruction, it's definitely going to be a much slower pace. Um, it's going to reteach skills over and over again so that students retain those skills. There's also going to be probably a scripted research-based curriculum. One curriculum that's been used at our school is called Fundamentals of Sentence Writing, which basically focuses on sentence structure so that students understand the difference between fragments and complete sentences. And they do a lot of practice with looking at examples of poorly written sentences and making corrections to those sentences. Um, it also touches on other skills such as capitalization, usage, punctuation, spelling, which also is something different too about special ed is that spelling is often focused on, which in the general ed environment, it's not. Another type of curriculum is called daily language review. This often looks like the format of worksheets. It's straight up direct instruction. There's a new skill each week that's being focused on. This is much different from the gen ed environment where teachers don't typically just give out worksheets or have a packet of such skills. And then as mentioned earlier, spelling instruction is pretty big in special ed classrooms.